That's tonight's special comment. Good night, good luck. But first, with about 20 minutes to spare, I am available for your questions. You will see microphones that I have not used to stereo my voice here and in the balcony if you want to go up there. Anybody in the staff wants to ask a question like, why am I sitting up here in the balcony? I'm happy to answer them. There is no delay. You will be heard live. Please do not. Please don't. Whatever it is you might do. And there is an alert uniformed attendant to bring the microphone to you. Stay well back from the stage because you never know what I might throw. Yes, sir. Houston, hello.
First time call. You made a point of talking about the wonders of Ann Coulter and everything she's done.
I wonder a lot.
Yes. And I wonder if you keep up with her esteemed publication, the Cornell Review. I mean, you do have a subscription, I assume?
No.
Well, I just thought you might like to see this from last month's issue.
Looking back at the Edward R. Murrow of our time, when students take an MSNBC's decision to replace CALS alum with shake weight infomercials and more repeats of lockup. Oh, okay. Interesting picture. And then, we had well, it absorbs more than Ann does. Keep Cornell clean. You want this back? Shall I sign it?
By the way, I was standing here about Glenn Cornelius.
Good man.
Yeah.
Among other things, the last person I ever started a fight with. Your last fist fight in college. It was over the girl who slapped me on graduation day. All that time I thought he had won. Turned out I had won. But in any event, sir, you've been standing for a while. I appreciate that.
Thank you for speaking from the heart.
Thank you.
My question concerns an article that Jane Mayer wrote last fall in the New Yorker about the foundations of the Tea Party. And she really makes the point that that party seems to have been founded by rich Republicans, Koch brothers and others.
Yeah.
And I wondered why that wasn't better understood. And would it not be better to call it the rich Republican Party or the billionaires party?
Well, because the people who are in it, who attend the meetings and who actually identify themselves as Tea Party members, are sincere. They just don't know what they're being used for. I don't have any animus towards them. I mean, there's a wonderful cartoon that was done. I don't know if you saw it. A fellow in, I guess, Knoxville. What he's got is a mouse with a Tea Party button and a protest sign that says, "Save the fat cats." That's what it is. You're getting the mice to defend the cats. And it is, in another context, it would be a beautiful thing. Because it is manipulation of large groups of people, using fear, using things they don't want to address, like their own racism, or fear of the outsider, the other, if you don't want to go towards the racism direction. It's change that they don't want to believe is possible. And it's part of the backlash that follows every progressive moment in this country's history. So the reason it wasn't better understood is the people drinking the snake oil do not want to be told that it's snake oil. They want to believe it works. The problem becomes when the people who are selling the snake oil start to drink it and they get poisoned by it, which explains Rush Limbaugh, Glenn Beck, Bill O'Reilly, who are just, used car salesmen who had good voices, and they started to to drink it. But I think the Tea Party, having found now, what, 2 months and change into the new House, the world has not reverted to 1953 as they were promised, and they're angry about it, so they're now feeding it on themselves. So I think this will be, the structure that you suggest and the cartoon emphasizes, I think will be very well known in time for 2012. Thank you. Miss?
I am so happy to see you. I see you on television and...
Not lately, I hope. If you've been seeing me on television lately, I would suggest a visit to the infirmary.
So I can't, there's a gazillion things that I would love to talk to you about. I'm a local activist and we fought for impeachment here, and now we're seeing Carl Roll coming on campus, which I just found out.
Yeah, but he's not going to the real Cornell, so don't worry about it.
Actually, I wanted to, I was thinking of what I could ask you and in terms of making it short, and I think since you're a celebrity, I was thinking, because I was thinking about this a lot, we need help in this area. And we need help in New York State.
The area being the United States of America, yes.
We have an issue called hydrofracking.
Oh, yes.
And
Gasland is playing, if you want to run out and catch Gasland, starting where at 7:15. It's being playing right now.
Probably,
on campus.
Will it
Is it
straight?
Yeah. It's one of the great issues of our time. It's a great, simple solution. Just, pump water endlessly into dangerous parts of the ground and guess that it won't cause earthquakes that could cause reactors to melt down and whole towns to vanish into giant sinkholes for which there might be no cure whatsoever, and the entire Earth would collapse in itself like a bad souffle. That's basically what it is. I exaggerated a little hyperbolically towards the end there, but everybody said things were working out really well at Daiichi as well. Don't worry about it, we got it completely under control. So yeah, this is an important issue.
With your sister coming from Rochester, I believe Rochester passed a ban on hydrofracking, correct? And we need help. We need...
Good work, Jim.
We need celebrity status, and I've thought about this before, and I was thinking about this, I said, gosh, what do I ask them? Because there's a gazillion things I want to ask you. And I was thinking, maybe it's important because you shared Cornell, you shared your past, and you wanted to help Cornell. And that was very generous what you did, by the way. I was wondering what you could do, and I think there's a lot you could do. You have your show, your status. We need to raise this issue to a point where it gains even more momentum, because we're trying to have a ban in New York State. We don't want it to, we're trying to stop it in New York State. It's sad it's happening everywhere else, but we need to put a lid on it, and that's what I was going to ask you. I know I was thinking of saying it later to you personally, but then I thought maybe it's better to ask it publicly in terms of what you could do, because I think there's a lot you could do in terms of...
No, I'm going to have to interrupt you because the idea that we could do this quickly has now expired. The point that you make, All right, let's see all of you get up and ask a question succinctly and perfectly too, all right? I bring a script out here. I've been doing this since 1979, all right? So I appreciate the question.
Can I just say one more thing? What's
Well, we'll find out.
I'm sorry, everybody. What's happening in Japan? It's so sad. And then all I hear on the news is Libya. And I'm not saying Libya is not important, but I think, as a media person, it seems like the same thing happening all over again. It's like you have an issue which we should be attending, and somehow the attention's taken somewhere else. And I think people are dying.
Yes.
People are dying, and this radiation is going everywhere. Shouldn't we be focusing on it?
I agree. But I'm going to have to focus on a couple of other issues right now, or we're going to run out of questions. So thank you for that. Let's ask the next question. Again, you try it. Yes, sir.
My name is Catherine. I write for a campus newspaper.
See, now this is what I was just saying. We made fun because her question was not succinct, and I just said, sir. Sorry about it. I mean, my humble apologies to you.
No problem. I write for a campus newspaper that is not the Cornell Review.
Good.
We're called the Cornell Progressive, so it's nice to hear you say that we're a progressive nation.
We are a progressive nation.
My question for you is, you said something about the stupidity of conservatives.
Yes.
And that's true in a lot of ways, but one thing they are spectacularly good at is staying on message.
Yes.
And, for instance, getting people to believe that our president was born in Kenya instead of Hawaii.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering how you think that, how they do that, what your thoughts are on how they do that, and how the Democrats can do that.
Are you aware of these managed persona programs? Have you heard about this? Managed persona, the computer savvy in the audience will know all about this. There are programs, and the U.S. government has contracted to have these managed persona programs hit websites around the world that say nice things about the United States. What they do is each time it's plugged in, it creates 100 people who comment on websites and gives a whole backstory and IP addresses and everything else. And one of the things that it appears that has been done in particularly the birther campaign, is to fill message boards with comments by people who don't exist. So this, when you sit there and say, this couldn't possibly be true, how could people actually believe this? I don't think these people exist. Trust your instincts on the crowd. When you say, how can people stay on that much message in a time when each individual issue facing us has 1,000 permutations and different points of view, especially on our side of the equation? Go with your instinct on that. Doesn't make any sense because it's not true. Because most of it is, in fact, computer-generated conservative porn. That's what it boils down to. Also, there's nothing as good as a good rationalization. As I said before, this is often, the birther thing is often an excuse to try to isolate the other. And this guy is as obviously other as anybody we've ever had. And by the way, that is also a sign of the progressive nature of this nation. Because we went from 8 years of being afraid to say, you know, the terror threat level goes up every time something good happens to the Democrats. Could that be something other than a coincidence? Nah, they wouldn't do that. And our response to when we finally figured that out was, you guys get the F out of here, and let's see, we're going to find the least likely textbook president. Perfect. And he's good at it too. Come on down, you're it. That's the nature of, and it's like a pendulum. It swings back to a progressive side, and then the Republicans angrily pull it back. In 1964 and 1965, when the civil rights legislation passed, what happened in 1966? Republicans swept the House in a way that made last year look like a minor victory. And they really ran on a platform that could be summed up by, we've done enough for these people already. That was the campaign, and people like Gerald Ford campaigned on this and got into the House, and got back into the House. And other new ones came in on this premise. So it's a swing back and forth. They do stay wonderfully on message, but I'll give you one last example of why you can depend on dumbness to help save the nation. I put Joe Wilson on cable television. I may not have been the first, but I was the first on one of the cable news networks to do this after the White House had begun to slime him in 2004. And Joe Wilson, the White House did not like. The White House also, under the Bush administration, had the mistaken impression that MSNBC was a right-wing operation, which was to some degree. And so they thought, okay, this interview is there to debunk Joe Wilson. We're going to send this guy, Olbermann, some talking points. And nobody could figure out how to spell my name. Thus, they had to send it through their people, if you will, at that corporation. And say, please forward this to Olber, whatever his name is. And they were talking points. So these talking points gave me something to go back to Joe Wilson with and go, what is this? And he absolutely went through every one of them and said, this is crap, and this is made up, and all the rest of that. But the best part was, I then knew who the 7 people at NBC were that the White House relied upon. So, depend upon, stupidity will always win out. We'll go back over here now. Sir?
Hi, thank you, Mr. Olbermann, for coming to campus and delivering an inspiring, if a little difficult talk at times. My name is Adam Woodward. I'm a senior in the College of Engineering, and I'm the vice chairman of the Cornell College Republicans.
Okay.
And as much as...
I'm not going to take any more questions from this side.
That wouldn't surprise me, sir. I really appreciate the sentiments about unity amongst Cornellians and what the real Cornell is. But I find your unifying rhetoric is belied by the consistent jabs and comments you make about the stupidity of conservatives. You make it seem as if our positions are merely held as a result of uneducatedness, as a result of a lack of understanding of the true nature of reality. I'm a Cornell alum just like you. I'm an engineer.
Well, not just like.
Fair enough. I would hope that when you critique Ms. Coulter, you fail to listen to one of the key arguments she uses against them is the fact that in lieu of substantive dialogue on the issues, they revert to calling conservatives stupid, as you have done over and over again this evening.
Because most conservatives are wildly stupid. I love it when my point gets proved without any heavy lifting. All right, our next contestant is here.
Thank you very much for coming and speaking with us tonight. So I think all the questions so far have been on politics. But since you spent most of really the entire beginning of your talk tonight on the personal side of things, I was wondering if you could talk to us about what was the most influential or most substantive aspect of yourself or thing you learned in your lifetime that's helped you maneuver in your career, maneuver in your life, and become, a successful, broadcaster, etc.
Well, just managing through life. We could use various nice words for this, like multitasking. Here, we can use words like prioritization. I like to think of it as learning exactly how much a system demands of you. And this is a bureaucracy. And it is, in many cases, our first experience with bureaucracy. But very few of them that I've ever run into have had new things that I didn't see first here. And what you learn is how much you have to give and where you don't have to give at all. In other words, how to corner cut. Corner cutting is not a bad thing, it's an essential thing. You can't have the time to do everything and give it 100% on everything, or things will fail. You will lose various important things, like sleep. You learn, if you're going to take that 9 o'clock class that you don't really want to get up for, you learn how to get through it. And in my field in particular, it was useful to me to learn this, because to this day I have never been asked about my grade point average. And in fact, other than having to do it sort of voluntarily on the air once, for a reason that we've now knocked to the ground, nobody's even asked to see the diploma. So it became an exercise in how do you do it well, but quickly. And that's true of everything that goes on here. Now this goes beyond, I'm omitting the obvious stuff. There's an extraordinary body of knowledge here. And I did a phone interview with Carl Sagan when I was at WBR. And he asked for me. And I run into people now who listened to me in college. And it's a wonderful thing. And it's a great experience, and everything that I learned here, and the professors that I had lunch with yesterday. Marvelous thing to know that they watch and feel like they have, that I'm some sort of evidence of their success as teachers. And that's another great thing about the university. And it is a great university, and it is the primary example of the university in this country, I think. Possibly because this is where my diploma's from. I have to do a little salesmanship, but I hope that answers what you've asked. All right. Yes?
Okay, there we go. How has media and the nature of media changed over your career? And what effect do you think that has had on the perception of us as being belonging to the right or left wing rather than being United American people?
There is some, as you know, theory about ice ages, and the theory that perhaps the last, 20,000 years were just a sort of warm spot during the ice age, and it's all going to come back and we'll have glaciers in Bermuda. I think that the form of media that we had in this country from, say, 1940 to about 1990 may have been like that. In other words, newspapers were politically oriented up to that point. the papers that are called the Democrat or the Republican, and those were just like nicknames. It wasn't founded by Jim W. Democrat. They were there as, organs for political parties. And reporting was done almost exclusively that way. The concept of some sort of neutrality is a relatively new thing. What has happened in media since I graduated from here was, I think 2 of my employers in the 32 years existed before I arrived at Cornell. The cable, although this is, of course, as you know, the home of cable, this is where it essentially was born in 1954, cable was such a non-entity nationally that when I went to work for CNN in 1981 and asked for credentials to go to ball games and said I was from Cable News Network, the answer usually was, kid, if you want to get a free ticket to the game, you're going to have to come up with a better story than the idea that there's an all-news TV network. Click. That's the way the world has changed. Thus, with all the technology that has been added to it, everybody knows by 8 o'clock at night when I'm on the air what has happened in the world. Pretty much. We have some new information. It will be broken at 7:58 and I won't get a chance. 8 o'clock will be too late. Certainly this is true of the network newscasts. And thus what happens at night on cable, and the reason I think I'm successful, and to a great degree people like Fox News are successful, is not so much a political point of view as the idea in a more generic sense that we are providing some sort of context to help you understand the news. What that means and how that might be used improperly is another issue. But in terms of what has changed, TV news, other than covering live events, is now for background and interpretation, the way newspapers work, or radio. And the wonderful, all-powerful internet, which now brings you all of your news, it will be replaced by something else, possibly implanted into your brain directly. And hopefully I'll be able to make a living doing that. Thank you. And to you, sir.
Well, now I'm tempted to ask to see your diploma to make sure it's not from Kenya or I already had a question picked out. So I was actually a bit surprised that you didn't bring up the other major bill, the one that taxes poor people and old people and people who donate monies to schools to set aside for the top 1%.
Yeah, and other legislation that is being considered would have, where the heck was this? It was also Wisconsin. They wanted to put in a ruling that, you notice, it's New Jersey. You can't there'd be a statewide rule against raising property taxes, so even if a community wanted to raise property taxes to restore state cuts in schools, they can't. It would be against the law to do that. I mean, think about this. People willing to pay more taxes would be prevented by law from doing so. This is the first time I ever find myself, or I think any American would come out in total defense of taxes. Like, those poor taxes, what are we going to do about them? But on the theory that we wanted to make this sort of a variety show of 3 different elements, I thought I'd leave out the other 12 or 15,000 pieces of pending legislation that would send us firmly back to medieval times. But thank you for pointing out that you think of it, they've already thought of it, and they're hard at work trying to make it happen. And we must, as I said, be vigilant about it. Thank you. Thank you for coming to listen. And you, sir?
Hi. So, Ann Coulter recently went on O'Reilly and advertised the benefits, the medical benefits of exposure to radiation.
Enjoy this story. What was I saying before? What was I saying about her before? And then I said, no, she's not that. No, you're being unfair by calling her that. It's an empirical fact. It is provable when you come out and say, oh no, the incidence of radiation poisoning and people getting cancer in the sites where there have been huge radiation areas, well those numbers are all low. They're low because most incidences of caused cancer by radiation don't show up for like 30 years. So the Chernobyl data is incomplete. And if you quote them, it's like saying, I'm doing really well in school right now, and graduation is coming at the end of May. Doesn't mean you're going to make it. Anyway, here's the rest of your
So, my question is for those of us with sanity here in the United States, and those of us who are worried about nuclear reactors,
that haven't met safety conditions,
Right.
that are located in areas near populated cities.
Oh, yes.
What can we do to overcome the nuclear lobby and put pressure on the government to deactivate these facilities?
Well, I mean, clearly, if there were a simple answer to that, we'd already done it already. Obviously, it is to work in the same way that conservatives worked to change school systems and all the rest, work from the ground up. Do not ignore the local elections. Do not ignore the mayoralty election in the city. Do not ignore them in, the elections in Caroline Center. Don't ignore them. Don't ignore the school board elections. Take some time and run for office, even if it's the school board. And you think, well, what does that mean? We see what that means in terms of textbooks in Texas, for instance. Exactly what it means. You change history, and all of a sudden, okay, we can all do the oral quote together, let's not even bother. The answer is get involved and put pressure on your representatives as well and say this is vitally important and we're not going to put up with this. We don't want to be able to read at night without lights on. Back over here.
I grew up in the 80s. I was used to watching a lot of maybe violent things or things that shouldn't be on TV.
Yeah.
And some of the fun was that there were things that were supposed to be normal and good, and then later it just went to, some things had edged attitude. So watching SportsCenter in the early 90s, a part of the fun was even if the game really was bad, you guys would rip on the game and make just watching the highlights of a bad game enjoyable. And
where are you going with this?
With television now, it seems to be that people are afraid to offend anyone. It seems to be getting, with cable it seems that with cable, even normal network news is to a point now to where if something offensive is said, you're liable to lose your job, as opposed to people just can't say, we'll change the channel and not watch it. To where it was like, the idea was cable, you can say anything, and network TV, you can't. Now it's network TV and cable, you're still at risk to lose everything until you go to HBO.
Yeah.
Is there any way this might go back?
Things are leveling off. I asked one of the classes today, in fact, if there was any substantive difference in their opinion between, say, CBS and AMC. And the answer was availability. That's it, that it's on a lower price tier. Some of the television networks, broadcast networks, as investors have priced out individual components in these giant media corporations, which is why I wound up with Current, because I don't have to worry if I offend. If I say something about Burma, it's not likely that Current owns Burma. This is one of the reasons I did this. I couldn't keep track of things anymore about cross ownership. But one of the broadcast television network is valued, whereas a cable network like USA or something, $11 billion would be the sell price on that. A broadcast television network is valued at minus $500 million. So this issue of being on broadcast TV versus cable is going away real soon. As soon as they can figure out how to take all those good entertainment shows, all 12 of them, off broadcast TV and put them on some sort of, super cable station, and then the networks will be, I don't know what they'll be. So technology will take care of this whole issue pronto. So be of good cheer. It may not happen immediately, but it will. I'm just hoping it, doesn't wipe out all cable news immediately, because I'm still planning to be on at the end of the spring at 8 o'clock Eastern. Current to CURRENT. Available on most cable systems and working on the rest. Sir.
Hi there, Mr. Olbermann. Thank you so much for coming. I wanted, politics aside, you and Rachel Maddow bring out some of the greatest journalistic on cable news by far, more than any other. I'm really looking forward to your event. Looking forward to that. Something I've been following lately, a lot of people talk about, particularly with the Tea Party, is the Coffee Party. Is where exactly is the organized left base? And there's a lot of discussion about it. I know Chris Hedges of Truth Think talks about it quite a bit. And as forward as pure progressive politics, what are your thoughts on the next stage of organizing for the left?
Once again, the best remedy is for the right to alienate people like Republican members of unions. I came back from spring training 2 weeks ago today. I was in Clearwater, Florida, wearing short pants, watching Albert Pujols take batting practice. And then I came back, got out of the car, and I said, just as I remembered, it's 22 degrees. But what was valuable to me was, as in 2006, after Katrina, and I'd seen these guys in spring training for the first time, all baseball players believe themselves conservatives, even though they work in the most diversified atmosphere. They all speak 2.5 languages, and they get along with everybody on the team, and they all speak Japanese, and they all speak Spanish, and they all speak English to some degree, including Ichiro Suzuki. I mean, it's a complete melting pot. But these guys didn't have any money, and then they have a lot of money, so they want to keep it, so they think they're conservatives. To a man in 2006, things were said to me like, has my president always been like this, or was Katrina something new? And I thought, my God, the Democrats are going to take the midterms, aren't they? Because that's what actually happens is, repeatedly, the middle is kind of fooled, and then they get hit in the head, and maybe they don't remember having been hit in the head previously, but they remember this one. In spring training this year, the ball players are saying to me, what is this in Wisconsin with the unions? I mean, seriously, everything I have is because of the union. This is true. I mean, they're hundreds of millions of dollars. They started with the fact that there was a union. And they know that, and they're conservatives, and they think this union stuff is crap. And if they think that, there are a lot of other people who do not have hundreds of millions of dollars who have had their eyes opened once again, as they always do in this pendulum swinging thing back and forth. What we can't have, I don't think, on the left, both because it isn't a good idea and because it is wildly impossible to imagine that it ever will occur, is uniformity. Because we see nuance everywhere. It's like saying, all right, I want you all to show up here wearing the same shirt, and the result would be this. It just doesn't happen. But to the gentleman from over here, his point, there is great staying on message on the other side of the equation. But you can fool all the people some of the time, all of the time, but not for long, for only short periods of time. Lincoln didn't say that either.
There's been a lot of talk on both sides of the aisle about tone in politics, and I was wondering if I could get your thoughts.
Tone in politics?
Tone.
Oh, thank God.
And I was wondering if I could get
I'm not getting into Conan now.
I was wondering if I could get your thoughts on cable news' responsibility, from you and Bill O'Reilly to Ed Schultz and Sean Hannity, the guys that get on TV and, they are passionate, but they bring a lot of interesting rhetoric into the debate on creating people like Michelle Bachmann or Alan Grayson. I wonder if you guys take any sort of responsibility for...
So you want my opinion on this? You can't have it. No, screw yourself. Sit down. No, I'm sorry. The softball game, I don't get a lot of batting practice anymore. All right, this is after my friend Gabby Giffords got shot. I said we have to drop the violent imagery, and I don't care. I mean, I didn't go as far as the president said. We shouldn't blame people for this. We should try to tone everything down. I just said let's stop the violent imagery, just that. And I dropped the worst persons in the world segment because people might take it literally. And I did other things that changed certain parts of the show. And I just said, I apologize. I inadvertently used violent imagery once about Hillary Clinton. It wasn't intentional, and that doesn't matter. It happened, and I apologized for it, and apologized for it again. And I called on everybody the night of the Gifford shooting, and everyone else there. I don't want to leave anybody out of that horror. And I called for everybody in politics and everybody in media to do something similar. And the only person that came even close was John McCain. I mean, the only person. I don't know how I'm supposed to be able to do that by myself. I think we have enough hyperbole, and I do it as much as anybody else does. And we have sometimes generalizations and all the rest. We don't need the violent imagery. We don't need to go out there and kill them and, bring guns to Tea Party events and We don't need to have Gabby's opponent holding guns with shoot the whatever it was, the machine guns. It's just a horrible thing. So I think that's the starting point. The rest of it, read the 1800 election and the things that were said and printed in the newspapers, and your eyebrows will burn off. Because there's still unbelievable statements that were made about the candidates there. And the country has always survived that. But the violent imagery is the thing we have to work on. And hopefully we can make a start with that. And I apologize for making the joke. It's just...
I would like to say that I write for the Cornell Review, and we love you. We love all of our Cornell alum. We honestly do. I think you're an entertaining guy. I don't disagree with you, but I can tell you care about this country. And I wrote the article that you stomped on, but we...
All better. All right, it's 7:45. Let's do two more, okay? Because I think they're using the hall for I don't know what. What? Huh? Oh, there's a JV hockey practice. You out.
Real quick. I'm a communication major here, and I've been doing a lot of research on media bias, and actually found that it's difficult to gauge and it's difficult to measure. But I did come across a lot of articles that explicitly stated Rupert Murdoch as a gatekeeper and framing going on in Fox News. And I was wondering, since I have a chance to ask you, does equivalent liberal gatekeeping happen at MSNBC?
Well, I don't know what's going on there now, obviously. And I am somewhat proscribed from describing what went on there previously. But I think I can say without fear of contradiction that I was not told what to say at any point after 2003. When they said that, they told me what to say in 2003, I said, no, screw you. And they went, all right, well, if you're going to be that way about it, I guess we'll just leave it alone. Part of the great difference that I alluded to earlier in terms of uniformity of opinion is who would be saying that and how would we all get the same exact message out? Because we all disagree with each other to begin with on this side of the political equation, to some degree. Not, obviously, to the way we do with everybody else. But there is no puppet master because you need a puppet master for each person on liberal television such as, or liberal media such as it is, because each message, Will Rogers line, I belong to no organized political party, I'm a Democrat. There is no such creature. Although, now that I'm an executive, perhaps. But seriously, there isn't. There isn't. If there is, I certainly haven't met him. You'd think I would have got the call early on. My master is the American public and the truth. Thank you very much. And for our last question, before the dancing begins, yes, thank you very much.
Good evening, Mr. Olbermann. This is a card-carrying member of the ACLU.
Uh-oh.
Some people, you yourself have said that the Republican base tends to appeal to people's ignorance, but people have also said that the liberal media, especially the liberal celebrity media such as yourself, Mr. Stewart, Mr. Colbert, appeal to people's desire to not look silly. I mean, earlier you literally laughed off the stage Republican, which I personally was embarrassed by. How do you respond to the allegations that you're simply appealing to people's ability to not want to look silly as opposed to giving them direct facts and allowing them to make up their own opinions based on those?
They don't want to look silly, and I'm not following the premise entirely.
Your show, Mr. Stewart, Mr. Colbert, and some of the other pieces of rhetoric is directed to the liberal base, is directed at laughing at the GOP base. There's snarky comments.
And often liberals as well.
Yeah, often liberals as well, but it's generally from more of a liberal viewpoint. that's given.
Okay.
And I was wondering how you responded to this.
Well, Stewart and Colbert do comedy shows. That's the first thing. That's principle.
Miss Maddow, you guys rely on comedy and snark very significantly, more so than the Fox News broadcasters do.
Well, that may be your perception, but many of the people, I mean, for instance, and this is dead serious, and the young man who wrote the article about me for Ann Coulter's publication will, I think, back me up on this. Ann Coulter believes herself to be a wickedly funny satirist. Rush Limbaugh thinks of himself and has called himself, the reason I called him comedian Rush Limbaugh was that he called himself that. We may not see the humor in any of this, but I can assure you that much of what they do is thought to be as satirical as Jon Stewart or Stephen Colbert. There are studies that have indicated that there are a few conservatives who believe that Colbert is not doing an act, that he has wrapped, it's an act within an act. He is pretending to be a guy pretending to be a fake conservative. He's actually a real conservative who then somehow fools all the liberals by getting the conservative talking points out anyway. So there's even the thought that Colbert is a conservative humorist. They exist, and I don't think they're funny for the most part. But I know for sure that Ms. Coulter has positioned herself as a satirist, as a humorist. So I don't think your point is correct. I mean, I don't think Bill O'Reilly is funny, but Bill O'Reilly thinks he is hilarious. He laughs at his jokes all the time. So I don't think, I mean, of all the things we might disagree with, left versus right, I don't think this is one of them. I think, you know, the amount of shtick on each side is about the same. And I'm sure we make no sense to the conservatives. And people go, why are they laughing? It's not funny at all. And that's the one, see, there it is. We're going to end on a bipartisan note. This is what we can agree with. There is no political humorist is actually funny. So on that note, I thank you, and I hope that for all of you who are students at this university, that someday you get a welcome home, the likes of which I have gotten in the last 2 days. It has warmed my heart, and it has inspired me for months and years to come. And I thank you. You're on behalf of the community. So thank you, Cornell. And